Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon. Whole lot to get into on this episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. We're going to open it talking about Georgia's three permanent SEC opponents going forward in 2026 and at least the next 4 years. Our thoughts there. Also, what we're watching for Tuesday night when the SEC announces the other six opponents Georgia will play in 2026 and the opponents in conference for the years to come after that. Then we're going to jump into the big part of the podcast, Georgia, Alabama. Had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart and a couple players on Monday, get their feel for this big matchup Saturday night in Sanford Stadium. Thoughts there. Give some early preview to Georgia, Alabama, what we're watching for, and then round it out with a little UGA hoops to end the episode. So stick around. Should be a fun one. Subscribe to dogs247.com. Go check out our YouTube, Dogs247, if you're watching this live. And also subscribe to the podcast and get ready for another fun show. Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon, and a lot to tackle on a busy Tuesday in Athens. We're going to spend the majority of this episode talking about Georgia, Alabama. Huge matchup, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on ABC Saturday night, but some other stuff to get into. Scheduling news, what we're watching for out of a big announcement Tuesday night, and we will also look at a little bit of UGA hoops later on in this episode. But guys, let's start with the news from Monday morning. We had it confirmed who Georgia's three permanent opponents will be in SEC play, at least for these next 4 years. And those opponents will be Auburn, Florida, and South Carolina. I don't think too big of a shock. I think the first two were pretty well locked in that it was going to be Auburn and Florida. The question was that third one. Had been discussion a few years ago at this point about Kentucky, because you talk about the level of, balancing competition and trying to make sure that the SEC teams, you've got a good mix of traditional rivalries while also not overloading some of these schedules. So let's start just very basically with your initial thoughts on Auburn, Florida, and South Carolina being those permanent three opponents. I'll start with you, Ben. You were the one on Dogs 24/7 who gave the folks reading there the news that it was going to be these three. What do you think about Auburn, Florida, and South Carolina being the picks, and just Georgia's, that being the three teams that Georgia can expect to play these next few years?
Well, like you said, I don't think Auburn or Florida is a surprise to anyone. In fact, I would say those were the non-negotiables, that if you were to ask anybody around Georgia which two have to be there, those two are going to be the two that people were going to mention. I think, when you look at what were the reasons why the SEC made certain matchups, like a couple of things that mattered to them beyond, the traditional rivalries, Georgia and Auburn. Like, I think they had said that there's 10 matchups that have played at least 100 times. Like, of these annual opponents, at least 10 of the matchups across the SEC are at least 100 times. Georgia and Auburn falls into that category. Any of these games that had neutral site history, Georgia, Florida, Oklahoma, Texas, they were going to maintain those as the annual rival. So like you said, the big question was, who was the third going to be? One thing that clearly got taken into account was geography and the amount of travel that teams were going to have. And I think that they said 90% of the matchups are either in-state or border state matchups when it comes to these annual opponents. And so I know there was a lot about Georgia and Kentucky. It wouldn't have been shocking if that was the case, but from a geographic standpoint, I think that like the average number of miles or something that people have to travel for their annual opponents is 281 miles, or I might have messed up that statistic, but something about 281 miles in the annual opponents. And so geography mattered. So that would have made South Carolina and Tennessee make way more sense for Georgia than Kentucky does. And when you look at the other piece that they were looking at, the competitive balance side of things, I saw the statistic that when you look back at the last 4 years winning percentages, the highest opponent winning percentage of this has to do with the 9-game schedule, not just the 3 annual opponents, but the 9-game schedule, the highest opponent win percentage over the last 4 years will be 55%. The lowest opponent win percentage over the last 4 years will be 46%. So that's a pretty small gap in terms of what the expected opponent performance would be. I think when you look at Auburn and Florida, neither one of those have like blown people away over the last couple of years, but I think that traditionally they hold a little bit more weight in terms of what you should expect those programs to do. I think you probably expect Tennessee to be a better program moving forward than South Carolina. So I'm sure that some of that competitive balance factored into why South Carolina got the edge over Tennessee and why South Carolina got the edge over Kentucky from a geographic standpoint.
Yeah, I think if you're a Georgia fan, I saw some folks kind of upset because they felt like the competitive balance was lacking with South Carolina over Kentucky. But I think if you're a Georgia fan, you should be pretty happy with this one. I think Ben's right that Florida and Auburn were non-negotiable. I mean that was, I think, the rivalries like Georgia Auburn, like Tennessee Alabama. Those were part of the reason we have this model, is because they wanted to preserve some of those traditional rivalries that are still not like that primary rivalry, like the Iron Bowl or Georgia Florida. And I'm thrilled that it's South Carolina from the standpoint of what that game means for the two teams. I mean, to me, a South Carolina fan could come in here and say you're dead wrong, but I see Georgia as South Carolina's biggest SEC rival. And you had the SEC East. Those teams played some very important games in the early 2000s and in the 2010s, some of those deciding who wound up winning the SEC East. The border war part of it, I really do appreciate the fact that, and we'll talk bigger picture outside of Georgia, some of these other annual opponents, but I just think that a lot of these games are going to matter and going to mean something going forward. I mean, if I could take one thing back with how college football has changed in the last really decade, it's that we've gotten out of the regionality, with the Big Ten taking so much from the Pac-12 and Stanford and Cal now being in the ACC. I think it needs to matter that you're playing teams around you. The thing I always bring up is like what makes rivalry so much fun is when you go to your office and you're a Georgia fan and the guy next to you is a South Carolina fan. And, you either go to work on Monday and, man, I can't wait to see Steve and let him know what happened. Or you're just like, man, I just got to get through this day because of how my team played. So I'm pretty thrilled. I would have picked South Carolina over Kentucky just because I think there's a little bit more meaning to that series traditionally for Georgia. And pretty happy there. Kipp, what do you think of these three teams, Auburn, Florida, South Carolina, seeing them being Georgia's permanent SEC opponents?
I would say that this game probably means a lot more to South Carolina. I mean, the Gamecocks being that third opponent for Georgia, I think them getting that game back probably means a lot more to them. It's a bigger rivalry for that fan base. But so what? At the same time, as of now, they're still the last team to beat Georgia in Athens. There's still like some value in getting to continue that game being played. And at the end of the day, people are trying to talk about competitive balance and trying to compare Kentucky and South Carolina. If Lenore Sellers isn't playing quarterback for that team, they look like a completely different team. And who knows what that program is going to look like next year, the next 2-3 years. I think at the end of the day, trying to guess which program is going to be stronger between those two is something that should be beneath the Georgia fan base overall. I mean, they've played all three of these teams extremely well over the last decade. It's not a murderer's row for Georgia. I know that, fans are comparing, trying to see who got lucky. Like, oh, Tennessee got a great draw. Florida got lucky. But those programs overall haven't really played that well as of late. And so that's a them problem more than a Georgia problem. They can only control the opponents they have. And at the end of the day, it's only the next 4 years, right? Everything's being evaluated. So anything could be reevaluated and changed. As of now, I think it makes sense. It fits. It's the three that we kind of said to begin with. If you're doing it correctly, this should be the 3 games for Georgia, and just worry about the things that you can control for Georgia, and you got your rivalry games. I mean, that is the most important part. 4 years from now, if they're thinking about changing, the Auburn or Florida game, then they didn't learn anything at all throughout this process. I think that was the important part, and getting to play South Carolina, like you said, a team that's nearby. I think that makes the most sense too, because the miles being traveled, conferences continuing to expand, the fact that now you do have games where you're going to either be going to Oklahoma, Texas, or we'll talk about later, maybe Georgia finds out where Texas A&M plays in the next 4 years. But that is a lot more miles than these programs are traditionally played on an annual basis. So having some teams that are going to be close by and kind of locking that in, I think there's value in that too, and just knowing what you have on the slate and just getting used to having normalcy on your schedule. So I think overall it worked out really good. There's been some truly memorable games. The David Pollock and Dondrell Pinkins play is like one of the most famous plays of the last 25 years for Georgia. So you can't sit here and just say that, playing South Carolina again doesn't mean anything at all. It's had some big time moments even in the last 5 years. So I think keeping that intact is good for Georgia, and that's a win for Georgia.
My thing with the competitive balance and what that means for Georgia, the point that I made on our board at one point when it comes to these 3 teams, Georgia hasn't lost to Florida since 2020, hasn't lost to South Carolina since 2019, and hasn't lost to Auburn since 2017. So I think things are fine in that regard. Now, I don't know if you guys have it pulled up, the other annual opponents that the other 15 teams in the SEC have. Credit to Chris Lowe at On 3. He's the one that put it out there for all the other teams. But I feel like the SEC did a pretty good job of balancing these, not only in terms of games that matter regionally, but also competitive balance and what this looks like going forward, understanding that you can't make everybody happy. You can't satisfy everybody. And I don't want to read through all 16 of these teams. The things that stick out to me that we're not going to have going forward, Florida LSU is not one of those protected rivalries. Thought it was interesting. I was just really fascinated to see what Auburn would get for that third team. I figured that they would not overload them with like an LSU or even like an Ole Miss, and they get Vanderbilt, which means it's Alabama, Georgia, Vanderbilt for those 3 permanent opponents. I really like the way that some of the teams like from the Southwest Conference, Missouri's got Arkansas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, some of those traditional like Big 12 rivalries that have carried over. Thought it was interesting to see Oklahoma. I thought there was a chance maybe we'd see Oklahoma LSU, but they've got Missouri, Ole Miss, and Texas, which obviously you had to have that one, and Texas getting Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. But I'll throw it to you, Ben. Just what do you think of overall what the rest of the league got? To me, it seems pretty balanced. Like they did a pretty good job. There's a few you could argue, but I think that was only going to naturally happen trying to make everybody satisfied.
No, I think they did a great job. I really do. Like when I look across, I'm sure there's someone out there that feels like they got slighted, or there's someone out there that feels like they should have had this game. Like the only game that surprises me that is not going to be an annual game going forward is Alabama LSU. And I understand when you look at both of them and why they tried to emphasize certain things, I understand why it's not going to be. But that's the one game where I look and I say, man, as an SEC observer, that's a game I would like to see every year. But as we'll talk about with the 9-game scheduling, like the beauty of it all is you're going to play every single one of these teams at the very least every other year for the next 4 years. You're going to get to go on the road and play every single one of these teams. And so it stinks that you're not going to be able to watch Alabama LSU 4 times over the next 4 years, but You're going to get to watch it twice, and you're also going to get to watch a lot of other matchups as well. So I think they did a spectacular job. And quite frankly, when we were talking about all this, I thought there was going to be some outrage, collective outrage somewhere about something, and I really didn't see a whole lot of that. It seemed like for the most part, everyone liked what they saw.
Yeah, Alabama getting Auburn, Tennessee. Those are kind of the two gimmies, the obvious ones. And Mississippi State, which it's important to note, only like 85 miles from Tuscaloosa to Starkville. I mean, that's a rivalry that's been played for a long time. LSU getting Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. Kipp, what do you think of the job the conference did with all 16 teams and the permanent opponents?
It was an impossible task, and I think they just had to go down and pick their battles. And I think at the end of the day, like you guys said, the most important historic rivalries were kept, the ones that mattered to the fan bases. And at the same time, when we're talking about the benefit of regionality in playing nearby programs, is that you could foster new rivalries. You got new teams in this conference as well. I mean, who's to say? I don't think anyone here doesn't expect Oklahoma Ole Miss to be fun for the next 4 years. And we could be saying, don't take that game away. That's the benefit of getting to evaluate. If you have like several instant classic games, then you're going to see fans say, wait, don't take that game away from us. And I mean, even like a Missouri, Texas A&M, you could just have just new games pop up that are like, okay, you know what? I didn't really give that one the proper credence it deserved. And now it's one of the better games. You're not going to have a bunch of duds. And if anything the last couple of years has taught us is that what is unfair competitively, like people are like, Auburn got lucky with Vanderbilt over Florida. If I'm looking right now at this season, what would Vanderbilt do to, Florida this year? What could Vanderbilt possibly do to Auburn when they play this year? So you can't predict what these programs are going to look like. I mean, I think the Commodores have kind of been a thorn in multiple program sides the last couple of years. So there's no gimmies in this conference. You can't brag about the strength of it top to bottom and then say, oh no, you gave them these guys. I just think you protected your traditional rivalries. You included geography, and you've already said, hey, we're just going to keep evaluating everything. As long as they continue to evaluate things well and don't pull any fast ones on anyone, I think you have to be happy with where things are right now.
Yeah, to your point, Kipp, on some of these games, all it takes is a few of these games to be really entertaining and really enjoyable. I think about LSU, Texas A&M. That's not, when Texas A&M joined the conference, it's not like there was history there. And there was some fantastic games, a couple fights, a couple interesting ends to games, but all it takes is a few good games. And yeah, mentioning Vanderbilt and Auburn, if I had a nickel for every time Vanderbilt's quarterback beat Hugh Freeze, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. All right, looking to tonight, 7 p.m. on Tuesday night, the SEC is going to announce the other 6 opponents for all of these teams, as well as the conference opponents going forward for the next 4 years. We still don't have a sense of who those other opponents are going to be for Georgia, specifically with 2026. But Ben, I want to start with you. What would you like to see out of this? This is more of not really a prediction, but as a fan, what you'd want to see as far as the other teams Georgia's playing, maybe some of their trips next year in 2026. What do you hope comes out of this for Georgia?
Well, if I'm just wish casting here, I'd like at Texas A&M to be on the schedule. I'd like at Norman, Oklahoma to be on the schedule. Like anytime you have an opportunity to go see some games, play some teams that you haven't played recently, and also go on the road to see some stadiums that you haven't gotten to see. Those are the 2 road games where I would like to see them on Georgia's schedule next year. I also think having Tennessee back at home this next season would be a big one, because I think it feels like we had the dancing around. Is this going to be the last Georgia Tennessee game? Is it going to be, is it not going to be? We don't really know. I would like to see Georgia and Tennessee play next year so that we can have this is the end of the string of games that these teams have played consecutively. Then you have the year hiatus, but you go into that year knowing well beforehand that you were going to have the year hiatus. So I think they could do that with a lot. Like Alabama, LSU, I feel like should be the same way. Like Alabama and LSU shouldn't just all of a sudden stop playing. Like they have the ability to put those teams on each other's schedules next year. There's nothing preventing them from doing that. I don't know that that's going to happen, but again, like there was a lot of talk in Knoxville this year. Like, is this the last time that these two teams are going to be playing each other? Nobody really knew. Well, it doesn't have to be. Like they still can play. I don't know how many years in a row they've played. They can still play again next year if you just put them on each other's schedule. I would say that in the interest of consistency and fairness, Georgia should probably get that game in Neyland, but I don't know, or in Stanford, but I don't know that it's as simple as that when you talk about creating all of these schedules. If you can just honor the home and home from the previous year the way that it was, I don't really know. That's too complicated for me. But those are the three games that I would like to see on Georgia's schedule, just because, I mean, I think the Texas A&M thing speaks for itself. If Georgia's not going to Texas A&M next year, it's like, what are we even doing?
No, I totally agree. Like that's got to be a must. Even though, as I told Dog Nation's Connor Riley, I would kind of like admire the SEC if it just leaned into the bit and was like, "Yeah, no, we're still not sending you guys there."
I mean, what they could do is they not give Georgia and Texas A&M on each other's schedule until 2027, and that game could be in Sanford. So if they wanted to, they could make it that Georgia doesn't go to College Station until the 2029 season. Like that is something that they have the power to be able to do if they want to lean into the bit.
The only other game I would add compared to what Ben just threw out there, I want LSU to come to Sanford. I think it's been 12 years at this point since that last game, and that one was an all-timer. We were talking about a 44-41 game a couple of weeks ago. That was the one with Georgia winning that one. That's the only other one compared to the ones Ben added. I am interested to see if Tennessee's on the schedule. My expectation is it won't be, just because of trying to get all those different teams on the schedule and the home and away splits. But as someone who grew up in North Georgia, and I've talked about it before, I got a lot of family that are Tennessee fans. I would like to see that series continued, but I just don't know how likely that is. And we'll find out Tuesday night. Kipp, any schedule requests for Georgia, things you would like to see for Georgia for the 2026 conference schedule?
I think you got it right. I think LSU at home, Texas A&M, Oklahoma away. And then you kind of they're just going to flip the other opponents, the ones that Georgia hasn't played. So they'll probably get Mizzou at home, Arkansas at home, and then Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt would be my guess. You can't. That's the thing about 9 games. You can't just flip it completely for every opponent. It wouldn't work out that way if you just flipped home and away. So you got to get, they're going to have to get a little creative in that. But that's my expectation with that. And then overall, I think Georgia's 2026 schedule is also a little bit in flux, because with the ACC now announcing they're going to 9 games, that Louisville game is probably hanging in the balance there. I would imagine that game probably gets canceled, if I'm guessing, just because, they have Kentucky, and as of right now, I think they have they play South Florida and Tampa. So if you're them, you're probably saying, yeah, let's back out of this one. So I think Georgia's going to be looking for another non-conference opponent as well. So I think that's another thing that just with the ACC this week, with that move, probably has Josh Brooks on the phones. I don't know if they officially announced Tennessee State, but that one's, I think September 5th is currently on the footballschedules.com as a game that's set to be played. But I think the non-conference is something that it's also going to be discussed over the next 6-8 months to try to figure out what Georgia does there. But I think that's probably it for me. I don't think there's a big mystery there. I just don't think that they keep the Tennessee game on for next year, and I think that's the group. And I mean, that's a heck of a schedule right there. I think, overall, you can look at it as being a huge challenge, or you could just say this is this is what you have to do in this conference if you can't beat these teams, and why line up and play them. Great opportunity.
Yeah, like I told some of the folks on the board, if you're scared, say you're scared. But that's just, what Georgia has played the last 2 years, I don't know that it can get much harder than that. So stay glued to Dogs 24/7, especially Tuesday night. Ben will have that for us. I'll be out at interviews as they announce the conference. I am planning, hopefully later Tuesday night, to just have sort of a story reacting to what Georgia pulled and what we think there. Take a quick break, come back, talk about Georgia, Alabama, share what Kirby Smart and players had to say, give some early thoughts on the matchup, and then talk a little UGA hoops after that. Again, please go subscribe to Dogs 24/7. Still got that 30% off deal, or pay just $1 for your first month. Great time to join. Getting ready for a huge night, Saturday night, between the hedges. We hope you'll follow along on the Junkyard. It should be some fun. So we'll take a quick break. Be right back. All right, getting ready for Saturday night. Number 5, Georgia. Number 17, Alabama in Sanford Stadium. We had a chance to talk to Kirby Smart and wide receiver Zachariah Branch and punter Brett Thorson getting ready for this big one. But before that, very cool to have Mark Richt in the house for a little bit. He and one of his granddaughters talking about their fundraiser for Parkinson's and Crohn's disease. They do an annual bowling event that'll be, I believe, the Wednesday of the bye week before Florida. Really cool. Ben, how cool is that to see Coach Richt back in the house and hear from him a little bit?
Always nice to see him in the building. Just great anytime you can see him, in front of a group of people. Like, he is same old Mark Richt, like you get the little one-off quips, you get the little jokes here and there that he wants to make, taking little shots at whoever he's chosen to take a shot at. But obviously this is something that means a lot to him, means a lot to his family. I know it means a lot to him that Kirby Smart has embraced this whole experience as well. You also see a very different side of Kirby Smart. I'll say that too when Mark Richt is in the room. I wish Mark Richt could be at every Kirby Smart press conference, because there's no bad questions on a day that Mark Richt was there. I tell you that much. Kirby Smart is a much friendlier member or person at the podium. I'll say that when after Mark Richt is done doing his talk about Parkinson's and Crohn's.
100%. And I shared on the Junkyard the link for that fundraiser if you want to give. Definitely a great cause, and it'll be fun for some of the players to go out there. He did note while he was talking that Mark Riggs said that he apologized that his notes were orange, and Kirby said, well, at least they're not crimson. So it wound up working out. Thought it was pretty funny when Kirby got up to talk. He said, obviously you guys know who we play. I mean, there's no need to really build this one up more than it already is. A huge opportunity for Georgia hosting Alabama. And again, I find this interesting. I've talked about it on radio hits already throughout this week. This is Alabama's first trip to Sanford Stadium since 2015. And I was really interested to kind of get the sense of how big home field advantage could be for Georgia. I want to play a couple clips here before I throw it to you guys. But here's Kirby talking about home field. How much value is there really there? This is what Kirby had to say.
Being at home is an advantage, just as I say going on the road is hard. Going on the road last year to play the games we played, hard. Going to Tennessee a couple weeks ago was hard. Playing at home, it helps. The atmosphere helps. The crowd noise helps. Being familiar with your surroundings and all that stuff helps. But at the end of the day, you got to go play football, and it comes down to matchups. It comes down to who blocks and tackles the best, who executes and does things in the key moments of the game. So certainly glad it's at home, but we still got to play well.
And I want to flip now to Brett Thorson talking about home field advantage, especially playing a team of Alabama's caliber.
I think it's obviously they're a quality outfit. The talent they have and the talent we have. So anytime you get two elite programs going head to head, it results in some good games that we've all seen in the past. So obviously we want to win the SEC, and we know Alabama is always going to be a top team in the SEC. So anytime that game comes up, you get excited. You know it's going to be a good challenge, really, to test where we're at and where we're going this year. And it's definitely exciting that Sanford Stadium's getting excited for it. So looking forward to it.
Anytime this week either of you guys can work quality outfit into your story, I'll Venmo you $20. Let's make it special based on what Brett had to say. But I did want y'all's opinion. I'll start with you, Kipp. I mean, how valuable do you think playing this thing at home can be for Georgia? Again, it's been a decade since Alabama has played in Sanford Stadium. Do you think it can, really swing things in Georgia's favor if this is a close game?
I think if there's one thing we've seen under Kalen DeBoer is that his team doesn't play the same type of football on the road. They're 2-4. They've lost to Vandy, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida State, in true road games. Lost another one in neutral site. So I think, that's where my opinion on which program has the pressure. There's a big narrative in that aspect on, which team has the most pressure on them to win this game. And that's where I think it's Kalen DeBoer. I think you have to beat that narrative that you can win a tough game on the road. And I think that's kind of where his program, his fan base, and, everyone covering that program is, can he win a game like this in an atmosphere that hasn't seen a loss in, 5 years, 5+ years, 33 games. I think that is a huge aspect of this game. The fact that the game's at night is going to play a factor. The fact that, there's the fans are going to be a little bit more hydrated, for a game like this, with it being at night, with them being allowed to hydrate legally within the stadium. I think there's just a lot of factors here that are going to create a very raucous experience, and something where, I think there's going to be some false starts in this game. We're going to have to overcome trying to make calls at the line of scrimmage. And I just think that saying that's not going to be a factor is, I think, a little bit disingenuous. I think it's probably one of the biggest factors in the game for a program like Alabama that's trying to get some confidence in its quarterback.
Yeah, I wanted to read a quote, part of a quote from Kirby on Monday, talking about the fact that it is a night game and how that changes things compared to playing in the day. Quote, I mean, we're not as fast, our GPS numbers say, for 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock games. They're not as fast when it's 85, 90 degrees with a humidity factor like we have around here. You end up who can survive, not who can be the fastest. And at night, you don't run into those things. I think the crowd has a little longer to get prepared for it, and they're louder. I mean, they're not as taxed, not as much heat. So the games I've coached in, played in, and a part of night games are a little more rowdy. So, I mean, the fact it's at night, I do think that matters compared to, traditionally when, the biggest game of the week was a 3:30 kick. I do think that the environment's a little bit different. And to me, my head keeps going to that Georgia-Tennessee game in 22, which obviously that was an afternoon kick, but that was probably the loudest I've heard Sanford, and I'm expecting something similar on Saturday. Ben, what do you think about the home field advantage piece of the conversation? Do you think it's legit, and how much do you think that can help Georgia, especially if this is a close game?
Yeah, I think home field advantage means a little something in college football. It's the same reason why I'm always hesitant when Georgia goes on the road at Tennessee, or last year when they're going on the road to Alabama or Ole Miss or Texas. Like I talk about Georgia very differently when Georgia's going on the road. And we were doing the exercise yesterday, Jordan, when we were walking from interviews to the segment press room of like, when was the last time Georgia played a game in Sanford that wasn't a double-digit win? Like, we know about Georgia's winning streak, but you start to put, like, Georgia doesn't just win at home. Georgia wins convincingly at home. Some of that is the best teams in the SEC probably haven't been playing in Sanford Stadium over the last couple of years. That's part of it. The other part of it is Georgia just dominates its opponents in Sanford Stadium. I mean, I think what we got to was 2020 Mississippi State, JT Daniels' first start, Georgia wins 31-24. That was the last time Georgia plays a single-digit game in Sanford Stadium. That game doesn't even have full capacity
Well, remember, we actually said it was Georgia Tech.
Oh, that's right. It was, but we didn't count. That's right. It was the most recent Power 4 game that Georgia's played, but it was a Friday night. Who knows? Weird Black Friday.
Rivalry game.
Black magic was happening in Sanford Stadium. Like, so that one excluded, which, to be fair, you can't exclude that one. It was the most recent Power Conference game that was played in Sanford Stadium. But the point being, Georgia just dominates its opponents in Sanford Stadium. It's why I've been saying, like, I don't apply much of what we've seen in the Georgia-Alabama rivalry over the last few years to what we're going to see on Saturday, because we've never seen a Kirby Smart team play Alabama in Sanford Stadium. We really don't know what we should expect in a Georgia-Alabama game when it's being played in Sanford Stadium. And so, yeah, we've seen these two programs match up against each other. We've even seen these teams with these current coaching staffs match up against each other in Tuscaloosa. But I think it's a different story when it happens in Athens, Georgia. And, maybe I will say this, Alabama ended Georgia's long, SEC streak that it had. It ended Georgia's long winning streak that it had. Now Georgia's got this home winning streak of 33 games going into a game against Alabama. Like, it does set up nicely for Alabama to just take away another streak from Georgia. But I do favor Sanford Stadium in this one.
Kirby was very complimentary of Kalen DeBoer, talked about, his work leading the Alabama program and what he's done in his time. And, Kirby talked about, I think he described Kalen stepping into some mighty big shoes, replacing Nick Saban. But I want to get into Kirby talking about the Alabama offense and specifically Ty Simpson, his thoughts, what he's done to this point. A little bit of a comparison toward what Jalen Milroe had done in the past, but Kirby spoke very, very highly of the Alabama quarterback, and that's what he had to say.
Ty's different than Milroe. You said it, so there's a difference in that. But he's a really good athlete. Like, he's a tremendous athlete. He played in games last year, and you watch all the snaps he took, and he has 60, 70, 80-yard runs that are, running down the field, outrunning good defenses. So he's a talented player. I would say he's probably the hottest quarterback right now in all of college football. His two last outings, I don't know that I've seen an incompletion. Like, the ball does not hit the ground. He's been accurate. He's been quick with the ball. They're really hard to defend because of their skill. They've got tremendous skilled receivers, backs, tight ends, but you got to have a trigger guy that can get those guys the ball, and they do. And he's seeing the field. I didn't realize, in the Florida State game, it was as messy and sloppy as the weather was at times. Like we were playing a game during that time, so I had no idea until last week. You go watch, and you're like, oh, okay. It was a rainy, sloppy game. In the other games he's played, there's been no sloppiness. I mean, he's accurate, he's quick with the ball, he's a good decision maker, and has made some elite throws. So they're clicking right now offensively for sure.
I want to talk just for a few minutes about Ty Simpson. I watched the entire Florida State game and watched the highlights from Wisconsin, and he's very impressive. I think he's got a really good arm. I think that he's very accurate with his throws, and we'll get into this more in a few minutes because I got a clip of Kirby talking about the pass rush. My biggest takeaway is you have to fluster him, and you got to get after him because that's what Florida State did. Alabama's offensive line at times looked awful against Florida State. I wouldn't say that was I wouldn't sum up 4 quarters of that game as awful offensive line play, but there was a lot of missed opportunities, and you could tell the pressure affected Ty Simpson in that game. There's a point on a 4th down where he's got an opportunity to run for it, and he's headed in that direction toward the line of scrimmage and it's got space and just decides he's going to throw downfield and he can't complete it, and they turn the ball over on downs. So he's got great zip on the ball. He can move pretty well. He's broken some runs, as Kirby talked about. But, I mean, to me, it's as simple as making him uncomfortable for Georgia to have a chance. If he's got a clean pocket for 4 quarters, I think Alabama's going to win because Ty Simpson is a really good quarterback and is capable of making all the throws to a receiving core. Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, I really like the weapons he has. Georgia's got to be very good about making him uncomfortable and making him think twice because I think that can set Georgia up well defensively. Kipp, what's your thoughts on Ty Simpson and just what Georgia's going to have to do to try to slow down that Alabama offense?
It's crazy what the I guess the narrative and the perspective is on the quarterbacks in this game based on how the schedule unfolded. I mean, Georgia is coming off its toughest game of the year after playing 2 non-conference games where they won fairly comfortably. And then, Alabama's the flip. They've had 2 get-right games after playing a tough game to start the season. So it's interesting. I do know that, going 17 for 17 against any opponent is impressive. But it was Louisiana Monroe. And goodness, what happened to this Wisconsin program? That program got, I think what's happened there in the last two years, Luke Fickell is probably in trouble there. It's just the expectations there has completely changed. But I think, again, there's a narrative that maybe Ty Simpson's maybe the better quarterback coming in this game. And I think it's just kind of, you have to look at the opponents here and just say that he's playing very efficient football, but at the same time, their offense is as one-dimensional as I've ever seen an Alabama team play. And I think that's the difference when you start looking at, Georgia versus Alabama the last 10 games, is that I've never seen them play a team that is completely predicated on a high efficiency passing game. Under Saban, it was just about, being balanced. It was about ball control, still run forward, but it was just a completely different goal in mind there. And I think now it's they're not just relying on the deep ball. They're just relying on trying to, beat you down in the passing game. And I think that is the thing that where you're looking at Georgia's defense and going, okay, I think maybe Ty Simpson can really pick Georgia apart. But at the same time, I think Georgia's defense, they do really well whenever you know what the opponent's going to do and what you have to do if you're Georgia, and that's affect Ty Simpson. That's the biggest thing. It's not just the secondary. It is, if you can get to him, then I think it's a completely different ball game, because you take that aspect of their offense away, and I think it's going to be a real struggle for Alabama.
Ben, what are your thoughts on Ty Simpson and just the matchup for Georgia trying to slow him down as well as that entire Alabama passing game?
Well, I felt like a lot of what Kirby Smart said is exactly how I felt when I was rewatching it. Like, does he throw in completions? I feel like every time I'm watching Ty Simpson, he's completing a pass. And there was, I wasn't getting to watch much of the Alabama-Florida State game as it was happening. And I saw a lot of chatter about Ty Simpson during that game. And I mean, he threw it, I think, like 40 plus times, and it was an ugly, rainy, sloppy type of game. And in the second half, they're coming from behind, so that they're going to be in passing situations. But it's funny because I kept seeing chatter like, oh, Ty Simpson's not playing great. Oh, this is what Alabama's doing. And then every time I would catch a glimpse of the screen, Ty Simpson would be doing something where I'm like, wow, I can see it there. So Kirby Smart describing him as the hottest quarterback in the SEC right now is probably not a crazy thing to say. It's only feels crazy if you just watched week 1 or just listened to dialogue that was happening around that game week 1 and didn't actually watch what he's been doing or pay attention to anything that's happened after that. I mean, that's how good I think Ty Simpson is playing right now. The question I have is, like, the last 2 times Georgia's played Alabama and lost, Jalen Milroe is a very, very, very different style of quarterback. And so what Georgia is going to be presenting defensively is going to look a lot different than what Georgia tried to do in either of the last 2 matchups. I know that Kirby Smart kept reiterating that Ty Simpson is an athletic guy himself, and he loves to do that whenever I think that he thinks that his defense might not fully appreciate how athletic the other guy is. Not saying Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroe are in the same echelon of athletes. That's not what he's saying. But it's like when Georgia went to go play Auburn with Peyton Thorne a couple of years ago, he kept saying, like, this guy's more athletic than everyone's talking about. And then all of a sudden Peyton Thorne's running for 60 yards. Not saying that's what Ty Simpson's going to do, but I think he wants to make people aware, like, this is a quarterback that can affect plays with his legs, much like Gunnar Stockton in some respect. Maybe not as much design run as Georgia's going to do with Gunnar Stockton, but when it comes to passing plays, extending the play, moving the pocket, and giving yourself new windows to throw into. Ty Simpson does a great job of that. And look, we've talked a lot about Georgia pass rush and those types of things. I think we might be talking about that a little bit more here in a second too. Like, it's got to come up big in this one. You have to affect Ty Simpson. And if he's got clean pockets, he's going to rip you apart.
Let's jump right into that. Kirby was asked about the pass rush going into this game, and this is what he had to say.
We evaluate it based on opportunities, right? And we haven't had a lot of opportunities. I think people try to measure those things just on statistics and rankings, and can't do that. We played a very heavy run team in Tennessee and a team that we were behind ultimately. And then the other two opportunities, we had the lowest number of snaps we've ever had. Didn't get many opportunities to, and we also subbed out a lot of guys. So I don't sit here and say, oh my gosh, I'm so concerned about our pass rush. We got to do a better job in everything we do. But I feel good about the rushers we have, and we've got to go out and execute. When we get an opportunity to rush, we got to rush.
I think it's as simple as this, that if Georgia cannot consistently pressure Ty Simpson, they're not going to win this game. I mean, you watch the Florida State film of Ty Simpson, and Caden Proctor was having an afternoon, and I mean that in a bad way. I mean, he was struggling at left tackle. Again, it's a situation where Florida State was moving the ball well on offense. They built a lead, and you could tell the pressure was on Alabama, and I think that it affected Ty Simpson, and the offensive line didn't play well. And, compare that to that Wisconsin game where, they just rolled over the Badgers, and he had all day. I mean, Ty Simpson was not under duress very much. It was a big part of why the offense was so successful. So things are going to be, I think, a little more balanced. Kipp talked about how much Alabama has relied on the pass game. I saw some of the Alabama reporters sharing that Jam Miller is expected to play. Kalen DeBoer said that on Monday, so I think that'll help that run game. But I think the Alabama offense right now is going to go as far as Ty Simpson can take it. Georgia needs its defensive linemen, its front seven to bring pressure. I'll be fascinated just to see how often we see blitzes. We see Georgia send guys from the second or even third level to get after Ty Simpson, try to make him uncomfortable, because if he's got all day, I think that's a recipe for disaster for Georgia. Kipp, what do you think about what this means? The challenge for the Georgia pass rush, just given Ty Simpson's ability and what he can do with time.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about the edge position. I mentioned that as an issue that I was focused on when you asked me about other positions on the last show. And then, Ben, you brought up Chris Cole. You guys brought up Chris Cole as being kind of the answer for them so far in the pass rush. And for this game, I think that's exactly what Georgia has to use is Chris Cole. I think the edge position is a question that will continue after. Looking at this game specifically, the matchups just point to Chris Cole having a chance to have a huge game and them utilizing him correctly. And I think that kind of brings up the, a secondary key to this game is if you're going to use him to get your pressure, the key there is not letting their running backs and tight ends get loose. Tennessee got a couple situations where their tight ends got loose and got a couple big catches. And you look at Alabama, they have Caleb Edwards, a freshman. They have fifth-year senior Josh Cuevas. Those guys have caught 3 touchdown passes this season. And then you talk about Jam Miller. He's got a touchdown catch. The last 2 times he's played Georgia, he's caught a touchdown pass. So not letting those guys kind of break loose, to the second level when you're bringing pressure, that is going to be a huge emphasis on this game. It's going to be up to, Raylan Wilson, TJ Allen, whoever's in there at linebacker. They got to make sure that, they're not letting anyone get separation in the second level, break an explosive on an obvious passing situation. I think that's something that's probably been a point of emphasis, is making sure that, hey, if we're bringing pressure, let's make sure it doesn't cost us.
Ben, any additional thoughts on the pass rush and just the importance on Saturday night?
Well, I agree with Kirby in that sometimes he will make too much about the sacks or the pressures as individual stats. And I understand that when you can only have pressure rates on the opportunities that are real opportunities to generate pressure. So I get that. It is alarming when you're going into week 5, you've played an SEC opponent on the road, and you don't have a single sack with anybody other than someone from your inside linebacker room. Like, again, I understand situationally we can't make, too much out of it, but it is like, all right, you would like to have just seen it from someone. And look, we've seen Christian Miller generate some pressure on the interior on some TFLs. We haven't seen it in pass rush, but we know that he has the ability to do it. Gabe Harris has lived back there at times. And so there are some other spots on the defensive line where you're seeing some consistent pressure, but you would like someone in that outside linebacker room or someone on that defensive line to have generated enough pressure in a pass rush spot to have one sack. Now, like I said before, I think Chris Cole is that good that it's going to shield it. Like, I don't think that it's going to be a conversation that we're going, like, we might be deep into the season saying, man, Ello or Quintavious or whoever it might be doesn't have a sack yet. And you haven't felt it. It doesn't hurt you because I think Chris Cole is that elite of a pass rusher. And like I said on the last episode, like when you have CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson at inside and you're still able to have Chris Cole on the field affecting the play, that is a good problem to have on third down.
No doubt. And I think it's going to be an area that's going to matter quite a bit. And when we look at how this game plays out, I think that's going to be one of the areas where Georgia's got to show up, because if they don't, it's going to be a long Saturday night between the hedges. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about this matchup. We will have a preview podcast. I believe we are going to record 12 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday with Bama 247's Mike Rodak. Have a chance to learn more about the Crimson Tide, ask some specific questions, and get to know more about the team going into this top 20 matchup. But I want to give us an opportunity to talk about this. And I'll start with you, Ben. We've given a couple areas of this game we are really paying attention to, but give me one or two others when it comes to this matchup that you're really interested in, you're going to be paying attention to when this game gets underway on Saturday night.
It's going to be the most coach speak answer I've probably given on this. I think third downs and turnovers decide this game. I think third downs and turnovers decide most Georgia-Alabama games, or most games that Georgia is in an even talent matchup. Third downs and turnovers decide the game. I was thinking about this when I was watching the Miami-Florida game, and it felt like they got very conservative with Carson Beck after Cormani McClain picked him off. And, I was saying I think when you're an offensive coordinator and you've got a guy that has a tendency to have some turnovers and you've got a 13-7 lead, you're going to beat Florida when you've already scored double digits right now. If you're Miami's defense, you already know you've got enough points to win the game. Do not turn the ball over. I think that this Georgia-Alabama game is much different. I think you've got to get aggressive. You've got to take chances, and there are going to be opportunities for Gunnar Stockton, who is not a turnover-prone guy, and Ty Simpson, who is not a turnover-prone guy. There are going to be situations where they both make mistakes. Defensively, I think that you have to capitalize on those mistakes if you're Georgia's defense or Alabama's defense. I think that they are not the type that are going to make many mistakes. So when they make them, you've got to make them pay. I think whoever wins the turnover battle wins this game. If it's an even turnover battle, I think whoever wins the third down battle wins this game. And so it's boring. It's pretty standard football breakdown, but it's just the way that I feel about this one. I think that these are evenly matched teams. It's why it's inside a field goal right now in Vegas. And I think Gunnar Stockton is as sharp as he was in the passing game against Tennessee. And if Georgia's offensive line protects him enough that he's not at risk for some of those blindsided spots where he's we saw it in the Notre Dame game, he gets blindsided, fumbles it. We saw it in the Tennessee game. He gets blindsided twice, really, only fumbled it once. I don't know how. I've gone back and watched that. The first time that he gets blindsided, I don't know how he held on to that football. But we've seen it now a couple of times. Georgia has to avoid that on the offensive line, just a free rush at Gunnar where he is completely at risk, completely unaware that someone's there, because Gunnar's not a huge guy. If you've got a 6'5", 285-pound defensive lineman running full speed at him without being able to see him, it's hard to hold on to that football.
Yeah, to your point, Ben, about third downs, Alabama, 6 of 17 on third down against Florida State. So obviously they struggled there and wound up mattering. There were several fourth downs they had to go for because of those issues. Kip, what about you? Any matchups, anything in particular that we haven't already talked about that you're going to be watching closely on Saturday?
I think looking at what Ben's already pointed out, the fact that on third down and in the red zone, this is a different kind of Alabama team so far. It points to, I mean, it's a strength on strength battle on both sides. For Georgia's offense, again, if you're able to actually establish the run game and you own the clock at home, you're going to get into the red zone. And I think the ability to finish drives and not settle for field goals is going to be the difference in this game. And where I think offensively, let's get introduced to Noah Thomas, a guy that hasn't caught a pass in 2 of the 3 games for Georgia this season, but we thought may have been the guy that pushes for the team lead and touchdown catches. You know, had a big season last year for Texas A&M, but it has not been able to really be a part of the rotation in the top 3. This is a great opportunity for him in the red zone to have a big impact in this game. And then on the flip side, we already know they're going to run 4 and 5 wide. I mean, they've got the wide receivers to do it. They've done it. They've already done it against Georgia last season. Georgia knows exactly what they have to stop. We've already talked about the pass rush. I think you have to imagine the point of emphasis all week or the last 2 weeks has been playing the ball, playing the ball in the air in practice. And a lot of people are asking who's going to be cornerback 2 out there. I don't think it really matters. I mean, sure, Daniel Harris could be the guy that's out there. How often are they only going to have 2 cornerbacks on the field in this game? I mean, Ellis Robinson's going to play, 50-plus snaps. You can go ahead and lock him in for that. That part is irrelevant to me. I think both those guys and Dalen Everett are going to have to be able to play the ball. You're going to have to, again, the freak plays, if they happen again, then that's going to be a narrative that sticks with Georgia. This is where you just have to know the ball is going to be in the air, be cognizant of that when you're in phase, when you're trailing your wide receiver, and be ready to make a play on the ball. I mean, we're not saying you just got to pick every ball off, but don't fall down and knock the ball, just deflect it. And I think that's going to be a key in the game. It's just they're going to try to hit you with the deep ball. I think that's a huge part of their offense is just getting an explosive play down the field. They're dependent on that. You take that part away, and I think it becomes even more one-dimensional, even more predictable. And so that's my key on both sides of the ball. You get to the red zone and win using the ground game, and make sure your cornerbacks know the ball is going to be coming their way.
Kip hit on what I was going to say, just the secondary chance to bounce back after a really poor showing. Although there were a few bright spots like Jonell Aguero, on the whole, the secondary struggled in Knoxville. So how do you respond? Because you have to respond with this receiving core. And to me, if you could give me Jeremy Bernard's stat line right now, I feel like I would have a pretty good feeling of did Alabama win this game or not. So it's really not as much Ryan Williams because I think there's going to be so much dedicated to covering Ryan Williams that other guys are going to have opportunities. The only other thing I would throw in there, very interested to see how much Gunnar Stockton runs in this game. He's not Thomas Castellanos, but if you go back and watch that game, Alabama just had no answer when he took off. And so I'll be interested to see, do we see any read options? Do we see them allow Gunnar to run, or do they want to try to keep him upright as much as possible, limit the hits? I'll say this too, watching that Florida State game back, I was really underwhelmed by Alabama's tackling out on the perimeter. So you know who that tells me is going to get the ball a good bit? I think we're going to see some Zach Branch screens. I think we're going to see them test those corners' ability to tackle and to make plays out there. So keep an eye on Zach Branch. I think you're going to see a screen early in this game. They're going to try to pop one and see if this Alabama defense can respond. Again, want to tease probably going to be Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central. We should go live with Bama 24/7's Mike Rodak, get a better feel for this game, learn a little bit more about Alabama. Well, guys, one of the fun things about recording this show live is sometimes there's breaking news. And shout out to Kipp for passing along the heads up that we need another coaching carousel check-in. Oklahoma State has fired Mike Gundy, and I don't think that's necessarily a surprise. I think the timing is kind of odd to do it on a Tuesday after they played on a Friday night. This is a job that I kind of think is sort of in the same bucket as UCLA and Virginia Tech, which had opened a couple weekends ago. This is not the most appealing job, but it is a Power 4 job. It's a job that, Mike Gundy has had, I think, since like 05. He replaced Les Miles. But they were very hesitant to kind of lean into the NIL era. T. Boone Pickens isn't around anymore to kind of support what they've got going on. I think that's going to be a tough job, and I think it's going to be a hard one to fill. We'll do our game of allowing everybody to make a prediction of who gets this job. I'll go first, just so my fellow contestants can think a little bit. Now, shout out, I think it was Bud Elliott over on CBS Sports who threw this name out there. I really like this name, and I think it's someone who's going to be a head coach here soon. Texas A&M offensive coordinator Colin Klein. I think that he checks a lot of boxes. I think whoever gets this job, to me, I think it's more likely it's going to be a young Power 5 assistant. It's going to be someone who's an up-and-comer who wants the opportunity to prove himself, to show that he can lead a program and that he's ready to take that step. If you make that hire, if you're Oklahoma State, you're going to have to wonder what happens when Kansas State opens. But I think you just can't worry about that. You got to make the best hire you can, and you can face that situation when and if it happens. So I think Colin Klein's done a very good job at Texas A&M. I think he's going to be a head coach here soon, and he's going to be my pick for Oklahoma State. Kipp, who do you want in this pool? Who are you going to pick to replace Mike Gundy?
Oh, I could tell you who I want them to pick. Zach Robinson. I think
an alum, an Oklahoma State alum.
Pretty good quarterback for Oklahoma State. He knows them well. I'm sure he's got family in the area. It'd be great for him to get a pay bump. You set up and comer, sure, right there. Getting a coordinator out of the NFL would be a big win for them. I think give him the keys. And I definitely am not saying that because I need the keys taken away from him from his current job. Definitely, being able to go from one great gig to another, I think is a win-win for everyone involved.
Kipp, did you hear how much Ben and I jinxed the Falcons on the episode we recorded Friday? I think you probably wouldn't be on this podcast if you heard just how we totally set them up to fail.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I set them up to fail by just saying that was going to be the peak of the season, and now, I think the odds are in my favor of being correct on that. I mean, what a low we just had. But, yeah, keeping it on point, I think, not his best performance for the resume for Zach Robinson last week. But if that's the worst you're going to see, it's probably not the worst you're going to see. Now that I've said that, put that out there into the ether as well. But, hey, go get him and see what he can do. And we've already had one reshuffling of the Falcons coaching staff, a couple games into the season. What's another one? I think we're probably going to have several more over the next 12 months. So let's go ahead and get it done now.
Replacing a former Oklahoma State quarterback with another former Oklahoma State quarterback. I can't say it's impossible. Ben, you got a pick to replace Mike Gundy out in Stillwater?
I sort of was talking about this with the Virginia Tech job and to an extent the UCLA job, though I think it's a little bit clearer where that one sits. Like, what kind of job is Oklahoma State? Like, Gundy's been there for so long. Like, Gundy is Oklahoma State. I don't know that they are positioned to be competitive in the Big 12 as the secondary team in that state, in a state that has to go out of the state of Oklahoma to get a lot of its talent to be able to build a roster. Like, I just don't know how good of a job it is. Like, I was just looking at Chris Hummer had put out a list of early candidates over at CBS Sports. He mentioned a couple of the guys that y'all had called out, the G5 head coach that wants to take a leap, makes some sense. I know that Texas State's head coach, North Texas's head coach, they were on that list. Barry Odom was thrown out on that list because he's an Oklahoma native. I don't know that I think Purdue's a better job than Oklahoma State right now when you're talking about being in the Big Ten and the money that you're able to get via the Big Ten compared to the Big 12. Like Oklahoma State might be easier to, I really don't know. So I'm just going to throw out a ridiculous answer and say, much like I said when I didn't think that UCLA would let Dan Mullen leave LA or leave back for Las Vegas without having a conversation when I picked Dan Mullen, I don't think Oklahoma State let Trey Lamb leave Oklahoma State after Tulsa goes and beats Oklahoma State. Now, do I think that he's the most qualified person for the Oklahoma State job? No. He's been a head coach for like 3 games now. But in those 3 games, he did beat Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State. So I feel like if you're an Oklahoma State decision maker, you've got a head coach in the state. The one caveat, he's not a man. He's not 40. Trey Lamb's only 36 years old. So I don't know. Can you replace Mike Gundy with someone who's not even 40 years old yet? I don't know. But that's the one that I'll go with just because I'll stick on theme of athletic directors not letting coaches who beat their teams leave the town without having a conversation with them about the new head coaching job.
Trey Lamb from Calhoun, if I'm not mistaken, is he Bobby Lamb's son? I think that's right. Longtime high school coach and one-time Mercer head coach. And Ben, I don't know if he is nephew. My apologies. Also, I don't know if you know this, Ben. Trey Lamb, a hell of a golfer. I don't know if you've seen any of that on Twitter. So maybe he can meet some of the boosters and make a positive impression.
And I'm so pissed at myself for the 10-plus point underdog picks that we put in because I was going through all the games. And then after I had finally settled on Tulane, which was a terrible decision, I went and I saw the Friday slate and I was like, Oklahoma State as a 10-plus point favorite. No team that plays football like that team has played for the last year should be allowed to be a 10-point favorite against any team, let alone a college football team. So big regret, big miss there. I don't know if anyone had that one or not, but should have been there for a lot of folks.
Crossed my mind, but I was like, this is Trey's like 3rd game, surely,
right?
And that didn't work out. So we'll keep tabs on our coaching carousel picks and keep you updated as more changes are made. Georgia men's basketball minute. Georgia officially began preseason practice on Monday. We had a chance to talk to Cal transfer Jeremiah Wilkinson, UTSA transfer Smurf Millender. Did not get context if Smurf is related to Hezekiah, so hand up on that one. Don't know the status there. Nickname Smurf, he said, came from when he was a baby. I don't know why exactly, but he said his parents called him Smurf. But they're expecting to play a faster pace this year. Really interesting to hear from them because those are 2 guys that I think will play in Georgia's backcourt quite a bit. I think that this team's excited, a lot of new faces, and getting ready to put in some work over this next month before they play a couple exhibitions against Georgia State and Troy. Did want to note this too because this does matter for Georgia basketball. Some big news in the basketball world on Monday with Bruce Pearl retiring, Stephen Pearl, his son, taking over as head coach. Very interesting, very notable for Georgia because the first SEC game for both of these teams is in Stegeman Coliseum on January 3rd. So that'll be Stephen Pearl's first SEC game. Want to say, hey, congratulations to Bruce Pearl on retirement. Had a chance to cover him for a little bit. Fantastic coach to work with. One of the most media-friendly coaches. Did a fantastic job of reviving an Auburn basketball program that was damn near dead when he got there. I think he's a fantastic coach. He's done a great job. And I really think very highly of Stephen Pearl. I think he's going to do a good job of replacing his father. And I think you're going to see him pick up right where Bruce left off. Ben, you were also on the Auburn beat for a bit. What do you think of Bruce Pearl retiring? And even too, that'll be, like I mentioned, Stephen Pearl's introduction to SEC basketball as a head coach will be against Georgia in Stegeman Coliseum.
Yeah, I don't hide how much I appreciate Bruce Pearl. As a reporter, you're supposed to be unbiased. You're not supposed to pick favorites, anything like that. I pick favorites when it comes to Bruce Pearl. I thoroughly enjoyed covering his program. He made the comment during his 14-minute farewell to the Auburn fan base. He said, thanked the media for, things. And he mentioned like open practices, and he was like, we gave you a new understanding of what open practices truly meant. When I was covering Auburn football recruiting, I would go do my stuff over at the football facility, and then I would go to Auburn basketball practices, and I would sit at Auburn basketball practices, and I would write all of my recruiting stories when I was covering Auburn, sitting at Bruce Pearl practices. I loved being there. He welcomed you with open arms. He trusted you to not, do anything that would sacrifice everyone else's ability to be able to also enjoy open practices. And so I was stunned when I think it was you that said the news when we were in the Stegman media room. I couldn't believe it. Obviously, this is something that's been in the works behind the scenes for a while, or Stephen Pearl wouldn't already be signed to a 5-year contract. But yeah, happy for Bruce Pearl and whatever it is that he's going to do next. Tough 48 hours, I got to say. If you're an Auburn person, you lose a game that you could have probably won if you don't get sacked 10 times. The SEC comes out and says that one of the touchdowns that your opponents had shouldn't have even legally been allowed to happen. And then the coach, who is probably the most beloved coach that Auburn sports has had since Pat Dye, is that fair to say? The most beloved Auburn coach since Pat Dye? Like the fact that he's just gone when you probably weren't really expecting that is probably a tough 48 hours to live with. But it feels like they are embracing Stephen Pearl as best as they can. And I'm with you, Jordan. Like, having been around him, I know his defensive mind. I know his ability to evaluate and recruit. Like, I do think that he will be a good coach. Maybe, pressure-filled job, but I also think Bruce Pearl wouldn't be leaving his son with a roster that he didn't feel like could win in his son's first head coaching gig.
Kipp, you are part of a divided household. I know that your wife's a big Auburn fan. Just want to check in because, like Ben said, it's been a rough couple days for Auburn sports.
Yeah, the end of this podcast is sponsored by Spindrift Spiked, because there's been a lot of those that have had to be consumed in the last 48 hours because of the Auburn athletic program. Yeah, my wife was shocked and upset, and yeah, then when told that, he was passing the job off to his son, kind of a shrug shoulders event. I just said, hey, it worked out real well for Texas Tech and Pat Knight. Definitely don't look that up. And I think Bruce has always gotten away with it because he was a good enough coach to get away with it. So, leaving the program right before practice starts, handing the job to your son, who may be a great coach, but I'm sorry, if this is where Auburn's program is, you can have a coaching search and give it to the one who deserves the job, right? But I think that's how good Bruce Pearl was as a coach. It's what are you going to do about it? That's been his whole career. When you get in show causes, he's still getting hired elsewhere because it's like, this guy can take you to the promised land. He's one of the best coaches in college basketball. And then that's how he went out saying, I'm leaving now. You're giving the job to my son. And Auburn did it. It's flabbergasted. I would be flabbergasted if I were an Auburn fan, because that's just not how it should be done. It's just the latest in a series of comedy of decisions made by that athletics program, in my opinion. And that, yeah, let's see how Stephen can do. He's been part of the program. It's not like you're just handing it to a guy that has no experience at all, but he doesn't have the kind of experience you're supposed to have to be a head basketball coach in the SEC. I mean, even at a program, Georgia wouldn't do something like that, and Georgia's at a different level as a basketball program. So I think it's I don't think it's being talked about enough, really, nationally, what's going on and how that handoff just happened, like in the middle of the night, basically. And so I just think that it's a disappointing end to a decade of the best decade of Auburn basketball they've ever had.
What I will say is, and I'm in agreement that it's a weird move, and normal athletic departments would not do what Auburn just did. And as we all know, Auburn is not a normal athletic department. I think it makes it easier. When I first got to Auburn, the assistant coaches that Bruce Pearl had were Stephen Pearl and Todd Golden. And I think it makes it a lot easier. And I know Todd Golden went off and he ran his program out at San Francisco before he got to Florida. But I think being able to see that there is someone who was on that staff that was a peer to Stephen Pearl. Those two are, I don't want to say speak for them and say best friends, but pretty dang close to best friends. I think it makes it easier for an athletic director to look and say, you have been around the Auburn program and people think of you as Bruce Pearl's son, but we have seen other Bruce Pearl assistant coaches go on to be the best coaches in college basketball. And so I think that there is a belief, maybe a blind belief, maybe a hope, however you want to describe it, that Stephen Pearl can be that. But I do think there is a little bit more merit to Stephen Pearl than just being Bruce Pearl's son than I think that he's probably given credit in coaching circles, because he never left Bruce Pearl and nobody hired him, whatever. But it's like, I do think Stephen Pearl's a very good basketball coach.
This is the equivalent of Nick Saban retiring in 2015 and Glenn Schumann getting the Alabama job. That's basically what you're saying, is a guy that's been in the program for a while and is 38, somewhere in there, but has not done anything else besides that. I think it is. I mean, it's not the equivalent, but it's like, it's in that realm of like, okay, that's still a pretty big jump for a first gig.
No, and I do completely. It's crazy that that's what they chose to do, but I do think Stephen Pearl is a good coach. So I'm in a weird spot.
I kind of had the same conversation with my wife, who worked at Auburn, not in athletics, when we lived in Auburn. But it's weird, and I understand people talk about nepotism and things like that. I think Stephen Pearl is going to be successful. Now, are they going to?
I don't know if he's going to be successful. I don't know about all that, but I do think he's a good coach.
I think it's going to go pretty well. I don't know that they're going to make the Final Four, but getting there is just a whole nother conversation. Wanted to throw out one more thing. Just wanted to pass along thoughts and prayers to the family of Sean Clark, the former Appalachian State head coach, who had recently been at Central Florida, passed away earlier this week, 50 years old. I didn't know this until we were talking about it on the Junkyard. When he was a player at Appalachian State, Georgia offensive line coach Stacy Searles was his offensive line coach. So if you've been on social media at all, you've seen the kind of impact Sean Clark had. A lot of players, former coaches, media members talking about what a great guy he was. He leaves 2 young children. I just wanted to pass that along. It was a very sad situation, only 50 years old. I just wanted to pass that along before we ended this episode. So we will wrap up the episode now. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to this after the fact. Go to dogs247.com, subscribe. Again, huge week, Saturday night between the hedges, Georgia and Alabama. We hope you will follow along on the Junkyard and keep up with all our stories and all the intel getting ready for this top 20 matchup. Again, looking at Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern time, we'll have on Bama 24/7's Mike Rodak to preview this game, learn a little bit more about Alabama, and get a sense for where the Tide is going into this game. Subscribe to our YouTube, subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think. Give us 5 stars. It helps us out so much. And also go to our TikTok, Dogs247. We will have some more content on there in the coming days. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.